We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. It is Saturday. Well, I did something I haven't done in a long time. Last night, I'm preparing to do the show. I was actually going to record a show with Old Soul, and then I would do this show. Fucking fell asleep in my chair. Now, the reason I fell asleep is because the night before, I couldn't sleep at all. I stayed up most of the night, moving around, rolling around. I just, for whatever reason, couldn't sleep, which is out of character for me. So I wake up in the chair. It's about midnight, not that far off course for doing this podcast. So I'm able to do that. But I'm 2 hours, 2.5 hours beyond when I was supposed to do the recording with Old Soul. So now I feel like shit. I sent her an email, and hopefully we can reschedule that for today some point, or tomorrow, or whenever. I can still do it even if I'm in Savannah, because I'm leaving Sunday about noon. Um, but I feel so shitty because I've never done that before. But I literally had no sleep the night before, and I was kind of nodding off the whole day, much to my wife's chagrin. And so here I am. If I sound a little sleepy today, that's why I am, because I was sleepy. I actually feel pretty good now after getting a couple hours sleep, but that doesn't do any good for doing the Old Soul um, podcast. So, Old Soul, forgive me. Um, I won't do it again. I haven't done that in years, but yeah, I'm getting older. For whatever reason, I didn't sleep, and at least I can do this one. All right, let's get down to business. We've got some emails to read, so let's do that. First one starts out, "Hi Boomer, when I hear various polls, stuff like X% of Republicans don't think Trump committed any crimes, I'm convinced that there's been a slice like 25 to 30% that has stayed constant for this entire 7 year shit show. They answer poll questions right down the line, no matter how ridiculous the position is." And you're right about that. I mean, that's what we call the base. The base is about 25 to 30%. Those are the people that love Donald Trump and support Trumplafucks, and they always have and probably always will, no matter what has happened. And it is ridiculous. The email goes on, "Out of them, I think you have a couple of cohorts. About half truly are total fucking idiots. We think they are. The hats and flags and all the rallies, they're like deadheads, only mean and stupid. There's another group, and we all know them, who are intelligent, but are all about owning the libs. These are guys that would put a nuke into a whale's bumper sticker on the car just to be a dick." Yeah, you're probably right, and I think that's a very good characterization. I'd have to agree with you on that. The email goes on, "But I'm like Lisa, the listener who has joined your podcast and is funny and adds a lot. I couldn't agree more about that either. I just don't get how anyone not in the idiot category supports this man. Out of all his lovely attributes, the one that is the most striking to me is complete and utter selfishness. I've never observed a more blatantly self-absorbed person in any setting, let alone the fucking president of the United States. I'm convinced that a perceptive 3-year-old could spot the sickness in that man. Certainly, dogs seem to see it. I agree with you. Some people like to characterize it as genius, and he's a mad, evil scientist or something. The man is just flat out stupid. He doesn't think about the things he says. He just spews shit out, much like a 3-year-old. But like you say, he's mean too. The email goes on, "How is it that these people think that an orange gold toilet using, raping, humorless, dogless pile of shit that does every single thing for one purpose and one purpose only is somehow going to align with their needs? So when he fucks a porn star, you get to two. When he grifts, he drops you your cut. When he trades our national security for a favorable hotel deal with Putin, that helps you. Oh, well, time to go on, open the garage door and hit the podcast, which leaves me happy versus Morning Joe, which would leave me so mad I'd call Mitch's office later in the day and yell at some poor woman answering the phone. She doesn't need that. Best garage door Jeff. And then he had another email that followed that up. Boomer, spoiler alert, Kristen will not push back, and or the editing will deliver an interview that makes you say, here we go again with media normalizing this rabid fuck. Garage door Jeff. He's of course talking about this Meet the Press, I think it's Meet the Press interview that's coming up with Kristen Welker and Donald Trump. Apparently they didn't learn enough off the CNN interview, so they're going to do it again on NBC. We were trying to figure out what's going to happen. How are they going to do it? Is it going to be a replay of CNN and they're going to fuck it up, or are they going to take some information from CNN and try to do it better? Well, we're talking about mainstream media, so I doubt that they learned anything. I'm sure that they're just going to do the same old shit. And if they do, the sad thing about it is I'm going to lose all respect for Kristen Welker and probably NBC. And then the next thing is, does that carry over to MSNBC? I don't know. I'm getting so tired of the media um, disappointing us and doing a disservice to us. Who are we supposed to fucking turn to? All right, this last email comes from M. Boomer, Melania Trump is from ex-Yugoslav Republic of Slovenia, not from Slovakia. And Alina's last name is Haba, not Baba. Greetings from Jacksonville, Florida. M. Thank you for the correction. I should have known that. I should have been right on that. Unfortunately, I don't give a fuck about either one of the motherfuckers, but I should be giving out the right information. So, M, thank you for that. And thank you for the clarification. All right. Let's get down to business here. Special counsel Jack Smith is asking the federal judge presiding over Donald Trump's January 6th case to stop the former president from making inflammatory statements that he said are endangering witnesses and will make finding a fair jury difficult. And he's absolutely right. This is something we've been wondering about. You know, we've got judges, whether it be Judge Chutkan or Judge McAfee, telling Donald Trump that he can't say anything, he can't attack witnesses or prosecutors, and he can't attempt to taint the prospective jury. So what's he do? He does exactly that. And we're all wondering the same thing. When is there some accountability? And I think that's an excellent question. I don't think Chutkan or McAfee are the kind of judges to just let things go. I know he's a former president, and that makes things a little more difficult, but for fuck's sake, he's doing exactly what you told him not to do, and it could ultimately affect the trial. So time is here. Something needs to be done. And to make sure something gets done, we know at least Jack Smith has sent this motion off to Judge Chutkan. Now she has to address it. So this is going to be interesting to see what she does. I mean, something has to be done about it, especially if the prosecution acknowledges it and files the complaint, which they have. So hopefully we'll see something in the next few days that will give some accountability to Donald Trump. If not, then I'm getting a little pissed. I mean, what more do you fucking need? Now, the defendant has reported or repeatedly and widely disseminated public statements attacking the citizens of the District of Columbia, the court, prosecutors, and prospective witnesses, Smith wrote in a Friday filing to the U.S. District Judge Tanya Chutkan. The defendant knows that when he publicly attacks individuals and institutions, he inspires others to perpetrate threats and harassment against targets. Well, you know he knows. I mean, that's his fucking intent. That's why he's doing it. You can't get anywhere with facts or truth So he's got to stir up his base. Unfortunately, the base is getting smaller every day, and they're a little paranoid. Every time his base has gotten stirred up and tried to attack, a whole bunch of them ended up in jail. So now these less courageous folks or less stupid folks aren't willing to take the risk of ending up in jail. And, that's more of reason in these people's minds than I thought was possibly even available. Now, Trump's campaign did not immediately respond to a HuffPost request for comment. Smith cited Trump's August 23rd post on his social media platform after his lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, was charged in a separate Georgia case. The election was rigged and stolen. How sad for our country. MAGA. He also included in the filing an August 5th post in which Trump attacked former Vice President Mike Pence, who refused to do as Trump demanded and declared him the winner of the 2020 election. He's delusional, and now he wants to show he's a tough guy, Trump wrote. Smith provided several examples of witnesses whom Trump supporters have targeted for harassment and threats whose names were blacked out in the filing. Details in the filing, though, suggest that Smith is citing Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, two Atlanta election workers whom Trump wrongly accused of fraud, as well as Chris Krebs, the DHS official in charge of the election, the security of the election, whom Trump fired after Krebs said that there had been no significant fraud. Now, Jack Smith said the defendant continues these attacks on individuals precisely because he knows that in doing so, he's able to roil the public and marshal and prompt his supporters, Smith wrote. As he acknowledged in a televised town hall on May 10th, his supporters listened to him like no one else. Smith further cited Trump's posting on August 4th, the day after his federal court arraignment, when he wrote, "If you go after me, I'm coming after you." And he has made good on his threats. Since the indictment in this case, the defendant has spread disparaging and inflammatory public posts on Truth Social on nearly a daily basis. Smith also showed examples of Trump's attacks against Chutkan and against the special counsel's office, including Smith himself. Well, clearly, Jack Smith has had fucking enough. And now he's putting it to Judge Chutkan, and there's going to need to be a response. Jack Smith goes on and says, put simply, those involved in the criminal justice process who read and hear the defendant's disparaging and inflammatory message, from court personnel to prosecutors to witnesses to potential jurors, may reasonably fear that they could be the next targets of the defendant's attacks, Smith wrote. And that's reasonable to say. We talked about Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss. These are just two normal people that happen to be working on election night in Atlanta, just doing their job, doing nothing out of the ordinary, certainly nothing illegal. But Rudy Giuliani, Donald Trump pointed them out to try to support their bullshit and put them in the crosshairs. And the problem with that is they're still in the fucking crosshairs. The things Donald Trump says does have an impact. We know that David Weiss, the special counsel looking into Hunter Biden, just indicted Hunter Biden. We know he's getting ongoing death threats. And it's not Democrats, it's Republicans. We know that Mitt Romney is spending hundreds of thousands of dollars for personal security for him and his family. And he, even though he's a Republican, is getting death threats from Trump-la-Fox. So, again, I don't know what a judge has to see. You can see him in the media doing these things. You can see the effects of these things. And these are the very things these judges said you can't do. But nothing has been done at this point. No action has been taken. So, of course, Jack Smith is had enough and puts it at the doorstep of Judge Chutkan. Now we'll see what she does. Now, Jack Smith went on to say, The government seeks a narrow and well-defined restriction that is targeted at the extrajudicial statements that present a serious and substantial danger of material prejudicing this case. Sounds like Jack definitely has had enough. Smith wrote, adding that he would also like Chutkan to monitor Trump's attempts to poll the District of Columbia because such a survey could actually be designed to sway public opinion in favor of Trump ahead of a trial. And I think Jack Smith is absolutely right. We see these polls, and they always seem to be so close. When we know what's going on and what we hear and what we see, there can't be any possibility that they're that close. Again, if these polls are taken by and financed by people who are Trump fans or Trump supporters, you can play with those polls. You can look at it different ways and make it say whatever you want. That's why I say don't trust polls. And the reason they do that is because even though they aren't winning, they want to create the image that they are close in the race, maybe discouraging some Democrats from voting. Now that's a long shot, and that's pretty ridiculous, but let's be honest, that's all they've got. So that's what they're doing. And it may or may not work, probably not work. But the fact of the matter is, it's not so much if it works, it's the attempt at trying to defraud the whole situation. And we know they have a track record of that. Jack Smith goes on to say the defendant's past conduct including conduct that has taken place and after and as a direct result of the indictment in this case, amply demonstrates the need for this order. As illustrated by the examples discussed above, the defendant's statements reasonably could have a material impact on the impartiality of the jury pool while simultaneously influencing the witness. Everything Jack Smith said in that motion is absolutely true. Frankly, I don't know why it took this long to get it to this point. I don't know why Judge Chutkan warns Donald Trump and then does it in the most visible, most public way. And it took Jack Smith to send this motion in order to get some attention. I don't know. Maybe that's really the normal process. It seems kind of ridiculous to me, but maybe it is. I mean, that's one of the things about the judicial system in this country. I think that's something we need a lot of work on because everything is so slow. And it seems like the people that do the most egregious things seem to get away with it. In this case, it's because he's the former president. Okay, what's too much? Yes, he's the former president, and there are some problems with indicting and then holding that person accountable. But how far do they got to go? I mean, I'm sure if it was some less serious, less dangerous crime, like he was just grifting money or he was embezzling things, those are pretty serious things. But there is no physical injury out there or no attempt to taint a jury pool. Even that would be ridiculous to just let him go. But what he's doing is so obvious, so in our faces. Why is it now, just now, that we're getting somebody complaining about it? I'll admit, I don't know much about the judicial system. But what I do know now, after watching all of this, I'm not impressed by. We need to shore things up once we get into 2024 and we get power in the House and in the Senate and in the Oval Office. We need to straighten this shit out. First thing we need to fix is that little memo in the FBI that says you can't indict a sitting president. We've got a much different situation than when Donald Trump came into office. There were norms, and most presidents wouldn't step beyond those norms for fear of some retribution. Well, Donald Trump walked all over that shit. Nothing happened. He got away with it. Now, anybody who has plans to be president henceforth knows that while they're president, they can get away whatever the fuck they want. If they happen to be smarter than Donald Trump toward the end of their term, they maybe clean things up and look better. We know how quickly people in this country forget transgressions, how somebody with some intelligence could bring back these people to their favor and get away with some of the ridiculous shit in the Oval Office. We're in that situation now. It's a dangerous situation because if somebody like Donald Trump or somebody like Donald Trump and a lot smarter could do even further damage. And when you look at what's happened over the last 6 years, 7 years, can we afford more damage than what we've already gotten? Yeah, I don't fucking think so. Now, I'm not big on scandal or gossip unless it's true and unless it's good and unless it involves a Trumplafuck. And this one does. This one involves quite a big Trumplafuck, but not on a federal level, on a state level. South Dakota Republican Governor Kristi Noem has been engaged in a years-long clandestine extramarital relationship with former top Trump aide Corey Lewandowski, according to the Daily Mail. Now, Governor Noem, who celebrated her 30th wedding anniversary last year, is 51 and has 3 children. Now, she's the target of critics who are blasting what they see as her hypocrisy. And it is absolute hypocrisy. She is one of these evangelicals, family matters, a politician. She's against abortion. She's against LGBTQ. She's basically a female version on a state level of Donald Trump. And now, in spite of the fact that she's married and Corey Lewandowski is married, they're having an affair. That just didn't happen last month or 2 months ago and they got caught. This has been going on since about 2018 or 2019. We're talking 4 or 5 years this has been going on. How she was not caught before makes no sense. I mean, she's the governor. She's under scrutiny all day, every day, especially when you're one like her. Now, Kristi Noem, as I say, stresses her belief in family values, and Trump advisor Corey Lewandowski, who is also married, started carrying on 2018 or 2019. Now, do you remember who Corey Lewandowski is? He's a douchebag that used to work for Donald Trump, might have even been a campaign chair or something like that. He's also the guy that's testified and pled the fifth and was just a cocky, stupid motherfucker. He is totally Trumplafuck, and he is a douchebag whenever you've seen him. You might remember him too from, it might have been back at the convention in 2020, where he was pushing through a crowd and there was some question as to whether or not he hit somebody, another woman. It was on video and there was all kinds of hubbub about it. I think he even got fired after that point. But even after that point, Lewandowski still was a shill for Donald Trump. He's an absolute arrogant douchebag. So it seems logical that Kristi Noem would fall into the clutches of such a guy, since she's such a big follower of Donald Trump, who is pretty much the same kind of guy. It's the old going after the bad boy, except in Kristi Noem's case, she also happens to be married 30 years and have kids, and Corey Lewandowski is also married. Now, Noem is rumored to be a possible top Trump vice presidential pick. Well, I think she's got all the classifications. Yeah, she'd be perfect for Donald Trump if Donald Trump ever had any fucking hope of being the nominee and actually winning the presidency, but he doesn't. That's what I always find funny. All these people positioning themselves to be Donald Trump's vice president, but he has no fucking chance. You're putting all these efforts in and you're risking your reputation to get something that you'll never fucking get. Now, she endorsed the ex-president, currently facing 91 criminal felony charges in his reelection bid, and she did that last week. Governor Noem had been at the forefront of the anti-LGBTQ legislation, including on transgender children and same-sex marriage. Now, when the U.S. Supreme Court ruled same-sex couples constitutionally have the same rights and responsibilities as different-sex couples, Noam's spokesperson said she believes marriage, get this, believes marriage is a special bond between a man and a woman. So you see why people are saying she's a fucking hypocrite, mainly because, well, she fucking is. Now, during her 2018 run for governor, Noam told South Dakota Public Broadcasting, "My relationship with the Lord is my foundation in all things. As a result, the values I hold according to biblical principles impact my decisions." Oh, really? We're called to love, but they're also instructed to stand for truth. I'm hopeful my leadership reflects that. Well, Christy, I don't know. Talk about love, you talk about standing for truth, but since 2018 or 19, you haven't stood for any of that. And like I said, this is more gossip or scandal, and I don't usually trade in that. But when we see these people, these quote unquote religious folks or evangelicals, it seems always to be the case. They spew this shit, trying to impose it on everybody else, but somehow, some way, they think they're beyond that. She has supported a constitutional amendment to ban same-sex marriage. In 2021, she signed into law legislation allowing South Dakotans to use their religious beliefs to discriminate against LGBTQ people. Yeah, she's a great gal. Now, in February, Noam signed into law a ban on gender-affirming health care for transgender minors. But she's family values and loves God. She just hates a lot of other people, which seems to be counter anything the Bible ever taught us. But you see, with evangelicals and radical right religious folks, they think everybody else has to comply, but anything they do is justified because it's in the Bible. Well, the shit she's talking about isn't in fact in the Bible, but she likes to cherry pick things, likes to exaggerate things, just like they do with the Constitution. They pervert this shit to support their narrative, and that is the essence of hypocrisy. Now, last year, she signed a law restricting transgender women and girls from playing on school sports teams that match their gender identity in public schools and post-secondary institutions. That's according to ABC News. Now, the Daily Mail on Friday, citing multiple sources, reported it had uncovered evidence of Lewandowski and Noam's fling, dozens of trips that mixed business with pleasure, private flights, and luxury resort stays. See, that's the crazy thing about it. They're in your face with this stuff. They don't even try to hide it. Dozens of private flights. Well, that could be hid if not for the fact that she's the fucking governor of the state and he is a former Trump official. They're going to catch people's eyes. People are going to notice, but they don't seem to care about it. That's the arrogance here. They complain of other people's sinful behavior, and they are the worst among them. Now, interesting thing is, neither denied the affair when asked by the Daily Mail. The governor issued a statement attacking us for the timing of the article, while Lewandowski did not respond to a request for a comment. Don't you love that? They don't deny it because they can't deny it. If they do deny it, they'll be proven to be liars and hypocrites. So instead they say, well, the timing is suspect, meaning the fact that it's being reported and the timing in which it's being reported is more of an issue than the actual sinful behavior. They're projecting it, they're diverting, they're distracting, they're going to try to delay it. But the fact of the matter is, it came out when it came out, and that isn't unusual. Seems like every presidential election, there's an October surprise. Where are we? Well, we're in September. It came a little early. Maybe that's what they're mad about. Yeah, we expected you to come after us, but you came a month early. Now, the pair met up this past Friday for a Trump campaign rally in Rapid City, South Dakota, but they were very careful to have no public interaction, like nobody knew. Despite being close for years, the Daily Mail also reported, adding that they were made aware of the pending story about their relationship. So, prior to the release of this story, they got together last Friday, or were in the same proximity last Friday, but they stayed apart because they got to keep this scheme going. They know they've been found out, but they still end up showing up at the same events. They just decide to stand apart, and that should justify and prove that there's nothing going on between them. Fucking so stupid. The two first were suspected of being romantically involved in 2021, but Noam scornfully dismissed the story as total garbage and a disgusting lie at the time. Well, there's a lie involved here, Christy, but it's you doing the fucking lying. And again, people's personal lives really aren't important to me. But when you constantly complain about other people's transgressions and you're doing the same thing or something similar, the hypocritical aspect of this is what's troubling. And you shouldn't be surprised if people are going to rub your face in it. She defined her traditional marriage, God-given union between one man and one woman, was particularly important to her and was the foundation of her beliefs, policy priorities, and the ideals she lives by. Sorry, Christy, I call bullshit. Now, Noam has a son and two daughters with her husband, Brian, whom she married in 1992, 30 years married. Critics blast Noam's family values claims. Republican former U.S. Congressman Adam Kinzinger, now a CNN senior political commentator, pointed to the Daily Mail story and wrote, "Sick and disturbing." Because had this been the opposite situation, where this was a Democrat, it would be splattered all across media and the Republicans would be going nuts. But in this case, they say, oh no, nothing's happening, even though there's absolute proof. Why this is important is because these people keep putting across their family values, their trust in God, the belief of one man, one woman in a marriage. These are the people shoving this shit down our throats, yet they fucking do this. So if they can lie about this, what else have they lied about? Well, we know they fucking lied about every goddamn thing. It gets tiring reporting these stories and then having Republicans ignore it, distract, divert, delay, whatever they're doing. But that's what they'll do in this case. But I think it's important that we keep exposing these fucks and embarrassing these fucks. These are the things that they have the most trouble with. And if we can taint Kristi Noem, I mean, there's so many other things you could call her out on, but this is the one thing that may have an impact on her people, meaning the Trump-fucks. All right, we'll take a quick break and we'll be right back. So, in spite of all the evidence, all the witnesses, all in our faces, absolute proof that Donald Trump is a criminal, Trump has denied all charges against him and has tried to demand the Judge Chutkan recuse herself from the case because she mentioned him during the sentencing of a January 6th rioter. Well, the fact of the matter is she never named him. She never used his name, and that is a loophole that the Republicans would certainly use, but he will try anything. I mean, he can go out and call out people in the press, threaten them, And he feels as though there's nothing wrong with that. But because she made a reference to the people that were pushing these January 6 rioters to do what they did, the fact that she mentioned there was somebody else, not mentioning Donald Trump, he thinks that should be reason for Judge Chutkan to recuse herself, which fucking ridiculous, and it's not going to happen. Now, in an article published on September 15th, the Daily Beast Jose Pagliari reports that James is moving full speed ahead with her civil fraud case against Trump, meaning Letitia James. And the Beast has obtained a list that shows the ambitious roster of witnesses she has in mind. I've told you before, I think this particular case, albeit a civil case, and Donald Trump will not end up in jail for it, the Letitia James civil lawsuit for business fraud may be one of the most devastating cases because he has literally no chance of winning it, and it will relieve him of all his money and maybe all of his property. And frankly, that's the essence of who Donald Trump is. You take that away from him, and what has he got? And then after the fact, you throw in that there's some criminal cases, 91 felony charges. This man has no fucking choice. Now, Letitia James has proposed a 57-person list that was buried in recent appellate court filing, shows the immense scope of the investigation that will be on display at the trial, Pagliari explains. New York Attorney General Letitia James' office seeks to obliterate the real estate tycoon and former president's corporate empire, squeezing at dry of profits gained over years of what she has described as a pattern of persistent and repeated business fraud. See, Letitia James isn't just suing him and trying to gain money from him. She's flat out trying to destroy him. And the reason she's doing that is because of all the damage and all the thievery he's committed over decades and decades and decades. My only question is, how did he get away with it for so long? That seems ridiculous. That seems problematic. Now, Pagliari continues, if James succeeds, this will be the first time the former president is dragged onto the stand to testify under oath alongside his adult children, longtime business associates, bankers who gladly extended him billions of dollars in credit in exchange for his farcical personal financial statements. That's the question. He lied about his property. He lied about his money, but these people continued to give him loans, many of which he never fucking paid back. Why is that? Everybody knows that Donald Trump is a deadbeat. Why do you keep giving him money? Now, that's an interesting question, and a question I have a feeling Letitia James is going to answer. Now, according to Pagliari, the witness that James has in mind include, among many others, Michael Cohen, Trump's former personal attorney and fixer, and the president's children, Don Jr. and Eric Trump, Deutsche Bank's Rosemary Vrablic, and Peter Welch, a former Capital One senior vice president. This could be interesting. Can you imagine Eric, the dumb one, which is really weird to say when you look at Don Jr., and then Don Jr., he'll be so fucking high he won't know what hit him. But when you actually put these people on the stand and they have to answer the questions truthfully at risk of perjury, it's going to be interesting to see how it ends up. Now, these Trump fucks have spent decades and decades diverting and distracting and delaying any time they would be put in a situation before. Dare I say, these Trump fucks have never had to sit on a stand under oath and explain their behavior in the business world. Now, Pagliari says the sheer size of the list, which doesn't even include the witnesses Trump's lawyers plan to call, it helps explain why the trial is scheduled to run up to around 56 days, early October till mid-December. Pagliari reports, however, the start date of that trial is now in question. On Thursday, lawyers for the Trumps made a long shot emergency request, of course they did, for an appellate judge to temporarily pause the trial, a last-minute gambit that actually worked. Now, Pagliari continues, both sides are now drafting legal arguments. They'll submit to a five-judge panel, which can make a definitive decision in the coming weeks. Still, the trial is set to go forward on October 2nd or sometime thereafter, and it promises to be fucking crazy. Now, this stay probably won't be given to Donald Trump's people. It's a Hail Mary pass, very similar to all the things they've done before, and I don't expect it to work. Now, it could delay it, but we're talking days or a couple of weeks. That's the most that could come out of this. This has been going on a long time. And now that they want to delay it at the last moment isn't a surprise because, as I said, this may be one of the most devastating things, court cases that Donald Trump has had to deal with to date. It will let it literally bleed him dry of everything he has, money, property, all those things. Now, on a federal level, House Republicans, who are veterans, by the way, and focused on military issues in Congress, are publicly voicing their frustration with Tommy Tuberville, and his hold on military promotions. I mean, he stopped tons and tons of military promotions, and before it's all said and done, he will have affected 95% of all promotions. And that's going to put us in a situation when all our military branches don't have leaders that are specifically focused on running their respective military branch. And this puts us in a weakened spot. And Tommy Tuberville seems to refuse, no matter who's talking shit about him, to release the hold. Again, this exposes our Congress for a weakness. It's never happened before because nobody of a right mind would do this, even a Republican. But we have a lot of people in the Republican Party that aren't in their right mind. Representative Brandon Williams of New York, he's a Republican who was a nuclear submarine officer for the Navy, revealed in a press conference on Friday that he forced a meeting with Tuberville to talk about a friend with whom he served in the Navy and who was set to take over command of the submarine force. He says, I went in and sat in Senator Tuberville's office for about 45 minutes until he had an opening and would see me. And we had a very frank conversation about it, Williams said. Another representative walks in the office. He makes him sit there for 45 minutes, no doubt hoping against hope that the guy would get pissed and leave. But this is a military man, and Tommy Tuberville is injuring his fellow service people, and he sat there and waited. Now, keep in mind, Tommy Tuberville has never served. He's a pussy-ass bitch. He is somebody that is just using something to his advantage to gain, I don't know what, fame, but he's causing all kinds of problem in our military, and he's part of a party that says they support the military, but this is exactly the opposite of supporting the military. If nothing else, it's hurting the military. Now, Williams went on to say, at the time, I was led to believe that it wouldn't last much longer. And here we are 2.5 months later, and we certainly don't seem to be any closer. So I'd like to see us get the leadership in place that we need, to face the threats that we face. Tuberville has held up more than 300 military promotions for pretty much the entire year, and it's all about a protest of the Pentagon's policy to reimburse travel expenses for service members who travel across state lines to get abortions. Yeah, these Family Matters folks, they really give a fuck. Maybe somebody should dig into Tuberville's life. I bet there's some sketchy shit going on there, just by virtue of him being a Republican. But basically what he's upset about is, and somebody pointed this out, this is an all-volunteer military. People, out of the goodness of their heart, want to serve to protect this country. And when they do, the military could really put them any place they want. And it could be that they put them in a place like Alabama or some other place like that, where Tuberville is from, and say there's a rape or some other kind of medical problem, and a person in the military needs an abortion. Well, naturally, it would seem that, like in any employer, um, but especially the military, given the circumstances, needs to take care of their employees. So it stands to reason that they would pay for um, somebody who was in need of an abortion to travel and stay in a state where it's legal, because Alabama, it's not, and take care of their people. I mean, this is a voluntary situation. If you expect to keep people joining the armed forces, you better fucking at the very least take care of them. And apparently Tuberville doesn't see that. His own personal opinions outweigh everybody else's rights. Now, despite some of his Senate GOP colleagues urging him to let up, Tuberville has absolutely refused to budge and indicated this week he will not negotiate a compromise with Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin. I got to tell you, if I'm going to piss some people off, I don't think I'm going to piss off the military. And in doing that, pissing off the military, he's going to piss off the general public. I don't know if he have hopes of running for re-election, but this isn't going to bode well for him. But this is what Republicans do. Even if it hurts them, they will double and triple down just to own the libtards. Well, the fact of the matter is, Tuberville is owning himself in this situation. The unfortunate thing, we have to wait for re-election before he's held accountable. Again, a weakness in this country, in our government. When people do what they want and they hurt this country and they hurt this military, there should be some retribution. But apparently there's not, because this has gone on for months. Now, Tuberville said, no, we've gone down for 7 months, Tuberville said earlier this week. And when asked if he's open to compromise on abortion policy, he said, they're not into it either. There's no give and take here, either side. This is something I've said before, and I get this from Trumplefucks, and for whatever reason, they can't understand it, or they can understand it, they just refuse to accept it. I get this all the time. If I'm talking about my beliefs in the things that should happen in this country with a Trumplefuck, and they throw out their ridiculous shit, they'll say to me, well, why can't you see my side? Why can't there be some kind of compromise? Why is it that you're the only one that's right? Well, the fact of the matter here is that the difference between me and this Trumplefuck is one is right and one is wrong and fucking evil. Tell me where the compromise there is. I should agree to be a little evil and a little wrong. No, I'm sorry, that's not the way it is. And that's the very same situation we have with Tuberville. Now, Republicans in the lower chamber are piping up. They're getting to the point where they've had enough. Because again, when it comes to 2024, the Republicans will be blamed for this. And it's going to hurt them in the 2024 election. A party that's supposed to be supporting our military clearly doesn't. Now, in that same press conference on Friday, Representative Mike Garcia, also a Republican, a Navy veteran, said he's requested a meeting with Tuberville to talk about the military holds issue, but has not yet even gotten a response. See, what's weird about this, Tuberville is a freshman. He just got in there. He's a former football fucking coach, and he's dumb as fuck. Why does a freshman in our Congress have this much power? Well, because it's a loophole. It's something that's been part of the Congress for years and years. And we talked about it before. One of the emailers explained it. But for whatever reason, he can get away with it. Kind of goes back to what I talked about with Donald Trump and these norms that Donald Trump had no problem crossing over. He did things that no normal human being in the Oval Office would have done. And this is the same situation with Tuberville. This could have happened many times over the decades, but no matter how contentious things got, nobody ever actually did it until Tuberville. That's a problem. These norms and these expectations of these people are no good if these people are willing to run over the top of them. Now, he had mentioned that these are not officers who are war fighters, that these are desk jockeys in the Pentagon. But in actuality, it is that folks have been war fighters for 20 years, Garcia said. These are the folks that flew with in combat operations, and they're looking to continue that service, and they're being compelled not to because of Senator Tuberville. Now, Representative Kevin Calvert, another Republican from California, chairman of the House Appropriations Defense Subcommittee, expressed frustration about the military promotions holds combined with the threat of government shutdown and hardline conservative opposition, forcing leaders to punt consideration of Department of Defense appropriations bill this week. See, that's the other thing we've got to get figured out. We've got to figure out the appropriations and the budgeting so that the country doesn't shut down on October 1st. But again, the problem we have with the Republicans, they don't care what's best for the country or the people in it or our military for that matter. All they care about is owning the Democrats. How hard is it for a Republican to understand that these people are working against our best interest as a country and that they are endangering this country? Like I said before, how much farther do you have to go before you wake up and say, what the fuck? I don't know what the end result is going to be with this Tuberville. The fact that he's a freshman senator is absolutely ridiculous. I think he's got another 4 years. So how long is he going to do this? How long is he going to damage this country? And what other things might he get involved in where he can shut things down and create further damage for this country? There's got to be retribution for somebody like this. There's got to be some legal aspects that hold him accountable, but apparently there are not. And that's why I've said when 2024 comes and passes, assuming the House and the Senate are under the control of Democrats, these things got to change. The only problem is they've got to change these things, and it's harmful to the very people that have to change it. So will they? It's going to be an interesting test for the Democrats. If in fact they get power, are they going to do the right thing, or are they going to try to protect themselves in hopes that something like this will never happen again? Well, I will say this, it will happen again. We never imagined this sort of thing happening, but it did. So we should be serious about it and change a lot of shit, like this little loophole that allows Tuberville to inflict this damage into our military and ultimately our government and our country. Now, when asked if Biden would commute his son's sentence, you know what I'm talking about. The White House reiterated on Friday that President Biden would not pardon his son, Hunter Biden, if he's convicted of a crime. Well, the crimes that Hunter Biden have been indicted for, it's ironic, and it's pissing off the Republicans because it's the one set of crimes that they can't tie to Joe Biden. This isn't really about Hunter Biden. This is about trying to nail Joe Biden. They've been trying to do it for 5 years and have made no connection. There's no evidence, no witnesses. There's nothing. They investigated this Hunter Biden situation with Joe Biden while Donald Trump was in office. And even at that point, they found nothing and set it aside. It wasn't until we got to this point that they pulled that out of the fucking closet, dusted off all the cobwebs and said, let's go at this again, even though they know better. Now the question is, would Joe Biden commute his son's sentence if convicted on gun charges? Now, White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre said no. This marks the first definitive answer the administration has given since Hunter Biden was formally charged on Thursday, though a similar message was floated in July. Now, I will tell you this, these are politicians. If somehow, some crazy way, Joe Biden lost in November, I guarantee you he would pardon his son. At that point, he would have nothing to lose. He'd be too old. He wouldn't be running again. And what the fuck? He's going to pardon him. Now, if he wins in November, which is likely to be the case, he might be under the gun and not be able to do it until 4 years later when he would be coming to the end of his term. I think in those situations, you can be assured that Joe Biden would do that. I would do that because, frankly, the indictments that are out there and the charges, nobody else, save for the son of the president, a Democratic president, would be sent to prison in these cases. Now, I still question whether they will go to prison or he will go to prison or not. I think they will probably sit down at the table and negotiate this out again, because this could create problems. Since nobody else would be treated this way, I have a feeling there might be some pushback by doing this. They'll probably have another negotiation. He'll probably have another plea agreement. Whether he will see jail time or not, who knows? And frankly, at this point, I don't care. He did commit some crimes and he should be held accountable. And what that punishment is, who knows? But we have to let that play out and see what happens. But the idea that Joe Biden would never pardon his kid, I think if the situation was right, he was at the end of his term, whether it be in 2024 or 2028, I think for sure if Hunter's sitting in prison and Joe's got nothing to lose, he certainly would pardon him. I would. I mean, Donald Trump pardoned far more dangerous people and didn't think twice about it. He's considering pardoning all the January 6th fucks. So, you know, if the Republicans are willing to do this, it shouldn't be that crazy that Joe Biden might do it. That said, Jean-Pierre said, I've answered this question before, referencing the July briefing. It was asked of me not too long ago, a couple of weeks ago, and I was very clear and I said no. Well, of course, that's what he's going to say. He's not going to say, yeah, go ahead and prosecute my son. If he's convicted, I'll just commute his sentence or pardon him. Of course, Joe Biden's not going to say that. Now, Hunter Biden was indicted of 3 felony gun charges, alleging the younger Biden illegally purchased a gun while on drugs. The charges could carry a 10-year sentence if convicted, 10 years for each. So we're talking a potential 30 years, but there's no way he's going to get it. There are a lot of problems with the case. Like, how can you prove he was addicted to drugs at the time he signed this paper? He probably was, but it's going to be hard to prove. Secondly, the very crime that he's being charged with in an appeals court, it was found that that law is unconstitutional, which is absolutely ridiculous. Somebody who's doing drugs should not get a gun. Now, he had the gun for 11 days. He never loaded it. He never did anything with it. It's still a crime, and there still should be some punishment. But you have to consider the egregiousness of the crime. There are people that are on drugs that commit violent crimes with guns, and that's a far different situation than what happened with Hunter Biden. If this were a Republican, the Republicans were begging to just let the guy off. And if the Republicans were in a position to do it, I can guarantee you they'd fucking do exactly that. Now, attorney Abby Lowell said Thursday it is a unique and unjustified charge. Hunter owned an unloaded gun for 11 days. There was never been a charge like this that has been brought in the United States. The only time this has been brought when it involves Hunter Biden. Now, keep in mind, this same special counsel was the one that cut the plea deal with Hunter Biden. Then he reneged on that. The deal wasn't that great of deal. They were still going to investigate and possibly indict him on other things. So the judge thought, now this isn't a good thing for you to cut a deal on because you're still culpable or at risk of being indicted on some other things. If you're going to cut a deal, let's get it all on the table and get it done with. Well, of course, the prosecutor didn't do that. Then the prosecutor got some pressure from the Republicans, and he decided, well, I'll be a special counsel, and now I'll put out some indictments. It's interesting that that would happen when we now know that David Weiss, this special counsel, we now know that he's getting pressured by the Republicans, certainly, but he's also getting death threats from Republicans. Now, the Republicans are a little pissed at this point because if this is the only indictment that's going to come out of his office, you can't tie it to Joe Biden. And that's just going to stir them up even more. That's not to say there won't be other indictments coming out regarding the tax charges, but at this point, the Republicans believe that they're being gamed. And, maybe they are. This whole thing is ridiculous. We've got people who tried to overthrow our government that are still not in jail, still not being prosecuted. But the president's son, that has nothing to do with the president, does some drugs and does some fucked up shit. He's supposed to be held to the fire, his feet to the fire, but everybody else should get off. Frankly, what Hunter Biden did, as bad as it is and as illegal as it is, it doesn't even compare to some of the shit now that we've got coming up with upcoming court cases. Now, as I said, somebody asked David Weiss, is this it? Is this done now, these indictments? And he said, no, the investigation continues. And that would suggest that they're also investigating the alleged tax misconduct. And the fact of the matter is, when he was ultimately pleading out, he was going to get a misdemeanor deal. And frankly, that's right in line with what should have been done. It'll be interesting to see if he gets different indictments on those same crimes. Special counsel David Weiss stated in a court filings that he intends to finalize charges related to tax misconduct by the end of the month. So Hunter's not done yet. He's got the indictment and the charges with regards to guns. Now we'll see what he does, the special counsel, with the tax charges. Is he going to change up what he's already decided and not make them misdemeanors, make them something more poignant, which would be weird? Are you telling us, David, that you didn't know what you were talking about when you cut the deal and now you're going to do something different simply because you're getting pressure from Republicans? Well, it's pretty clear that that's what's going on here. Now, Republicans allege that Biden used his position to garner lucrative deals for his son. Members of the House GOP have used the claims to push for an impeachment inquiry against the president. The only problem with this is there is no evidence. There are no witnesses. They're trying so hard to pin Joe Biden with something, but there is nothing. We go through 2 impeachments with Donald Trump where there's absolute evidence and they let him go. They've got Joe Biden with no evidence and they want to push for an impeachment. Now, Kevin McCarthy's decision to launch an impeachment inquiry into President Joe Biden this past week is an incredible lesson in doing your homework. Now, according to Politico, in 2020, the Donald Trump-led Justice Department formally declared that impeachment inquiries are invalid unless the entire chamber takes formal votes to authorize them. In fact, the Republicans admonished Nancy Pelosi for doing exactly or trying to do exactly what Kevin McCarthy is doing now. Instead of taking the vote, just making the pronouncement that we're going to do this investigation. So Nancy Pelosi said, okay, and then she took the vote and she won the vote. Now, the reason Kevin McCarthy doesn't want to do the vote is because he can't get the votes, not enough votes to get this done. So instead of being embarrassed by that, he's just going to command it. And that's what he did. Now, as the head of the Justice Department's Office of Legal Counsel wrote at the time, we conclude that the House must expressly authorize a committee to conduct an impeachment investigation and to use compulsory process in that investigation before the committee may compel the production of documents or testimony. This is what Republicans insisted on with Nancy Pelosi. But now that it's their turn, and because they can't win, they say, "Oh no, that's old news." It's kind of like what they did with the Supreme Court. Barack Obama wanted to appoint Merrick Garland to the Supreme Court. The Republicans said, no, you can't do that in the last year of a term. You can't do that. Yet, when it came to be the Republicans' chance, toward the end of Donald Trump's term, they shoved Amy Coney Barrett down our fucking throat. See, they're all about rules and regulations, but only for Democrats. They don't have to be held responsible for said rules and regulations. It's fucking ridiculous. Now, the Politico article also notes that the House GOP's impending inquiry into Biden's is expected to feature significant scrutiny of actions taken by the Justice Department, FBI, and IRS in relation to its investigation of Biden's son Hunter and his foreign business dealings. All three agencies should be bound by the OLC opinion. In other words, McCarthy's decision to barrel forward ignores the guidance put in place just a few years ago by Republicans. It's the sort of self-defeating, chaotic revelation that has come to define McCarthy's tenure as a speaker. Kevin McCarthy's tenure as the Speaker of the House has created nothing but a shit show in the House of Representatives. We shouldn't be surprised by that, since it took 15 fucking tries to get him elected to his current position. And now the MAGA group is mad at Kevin McCarthy and threatening to make a motion to vacate and kick him out of his job. But unfortunately, for MAGA, they also know they don't have the votes to do that. So they're going to fight and complain and threaten and do all that stuff, but they will never take the opportunity to vote unless they're forced to do it. And when they do the vote, they will fail, and that will immediately weaken MAGA. Now, we know MAGA is weak already, but apparently the Republicans still feel obliged to follow a minority in their caucus because they're afraid. This is all about the Republicans being gutless motherfuckers. The question is, when are they going to finally see the light? We know that Kevin McCarthy said to Matt Gaetz and some of the other Republicans in the Freedom Caucus, you want to vacate my position? Fucking do it. That's exactly what he said. And now Kevin McCarthy has finally grown a set of balls and understands what I've been telling you all along. They don't have the votes. So call them on their bullshit. But you know what? I don't think they will do it, because they will be hurt far more if they put it to a vote and they lose, because then they got nothing to hold over anybody's head. That's the one thing about threats. Threats are only powerful up until the time you exercise that threat. They fucking know this, because once they exercise the threat and nothing happens, then they got nothing. They're smart enough to know that. So we'll see. But a lot has to change with our government, our Congress, our judicial system. We are in a bad situation. It's not good. It shows just how weak all of this really is. And over and above all the obvious changes we have to make, if in 2024 the Democrats take control of the House and the Senate, We need to get on the stick and fucking change this stuff quick, fast, and in a hurry. But will the Democrats do that? I don't know yet. But even if the Democrats wipe out the Republicans in the 2024 election, that's why it's important for us to keep pushing hard and keep the pressure on. All right, we are going to wrap up the Rational Boomer podcast. I appreciate you taking the time to listen. Again, I apologize to Old Soul for falling asleep in my fucking chair. So get back to me and let's get a show recorded ASAP, whenever's convenient for you. And again, I apologize for that. I hope you have a great day. And of course, we'll talk to you again tomorrow.